By the time my wife handed her ex the key to my father's car, the announcer had already called the drivers to the starting grid. I am Cole Barrett, the mechanic who rebuilt that silver-blue roadster bolt by bolt. Livia Hart is my wife, the heiress who runs the motor museum behind us. Chase Maddox is the man she nearly married before me. With 10 minutes left before the memorial run, Livia placed the worn brass key in his open palm. I stepped between them and took it. Chase's fingers closed on air. Livia's stayed extended for half a second, as if the handoff had become a photograph she could still correct. "Cole," she said. I opened the driver's door. "If my father's car crosses that line, I'm driving it." Engines idled, and cameras lifted around the space between us. Chase recovered first. He smiled without warmth. "You haven't completed a timed lap in 6 years. Then you'll have plenty to watch." Livia moved close enough that only we could hear her, dressed for the track rather than a memorial photograph. "Taking the key is not the same as being ready," she said. "Giving it away is not the same as asking me." I asked for 7 months. That landed because it was true. It did not make what she had done smaller. Chief Steward Mara Bell reached us from the pit wall. She had inspected Heart Circuit for 12 years, and her safety rulings overruled surnames and sponsors. "I have one registered driver in front of me and one angry restorer holding his key," Mara said. "Which problem am I solving?" "Cole is taking the ceremonial lap," I said. "Cole is not registered," Chase replied. Livia looked at the key in my hand, then at my face. I expected her to order security. I almost wanted her to. It would have made the betrayal clean. "He is listed as reserve," she told Mara. "I filed it Tuesday." Chase turned sharply. That information was new to him too. Mara held out her hand. "License." Mine was in the inner pocket of my jacket. I gave it to her. She checked the date, checked me, and pointed toward the car. "One untimed installation lap. No passing. Pit speed on entry. If I wave you in, you come in. If Barrett says the car feels wrong, the car stops. Those terms work for all 3 egos." Chase said nothing. Livia nodded. I climbed in. The cockpit smelled of leather and warm oil. My father had shaped the scarred walnut steering wheel by hand. I wrapped my fingers around it and heard his old instruction. "Listen before you ask it to move." I inserted the brass key. The engine turned twice and caught with a clean bark. The vibration came through the seat, the pedals, and the bones of my hands. Cameras lifted. People along the fence cheered. Livia did not. She watched the front wheels. I eased away. The first corner was little more than a bend. The car settled properly. Second gear engaged without complaint. At the end of the back straight, I felt a knock through the steering column. Not loud, not dramatic, wrong. I reduced speed and moved the wheel 2 degrees left, then right. The response arrived late on the right side. At the next bend, the delay grew. Myra raised the pit board, but I was already turning in. The crowd's cheer thinned. Chase stood at the wall with his arms folded. Livia was beside him, one hand against her radio. I stopped in our inspection bay and killed the engine. "The right steering arm is changing under load," I said as I climbed out. Chase gave a short laugh. "That car tracked perfectly yesterday." I crouched beside the front wheel. The fasteners were new. So was the blue anodized linkage behind them. My restoration specification used the original forged arms, crack-tested and sleeved. Somebody had replaced them after my final inspection. "Who fitted this?" I asked. No one answered quickly enough. I stood Livia. She came into the bay. "I approved a modern safety linkage on Wednesday. You approved work on the car without telling me." "Then I registered Chase and myself for Sunday's 2-driver exhibition," she said. "I was taking the second leg. You stopped answering questions about the car. That is not permission." "No, it is." She did not hide behind a softer word. But the original geometry would not meet Chase's target response, and the installation was signed off before yesterday's test. "By whom?" Chase stepped closer. "My engineer." I looked from him to Livia. "Your engineer changed the steering on my father's car so it would feel more like yours. So it would be safer at speed," Chase said. "Then why did it move under load?" His smile disappeared. Mara crouched with a flashlight and placed one finger against the adjustment collar. "Witness paint is broken." The yellow inspection mark should have formed one straight line across the collar and lock nut. Instead, The halves sat a thumb width apart. Setting was altered after inspection, she said. Car is withdrawn until the front assembly is measured and signed again. The announcer began filling time outside. Through the open bay, I could see people turning toward the large display, waiting for a replay of my short, unimpressive lap. I held up the key. The car stays here. Chase looked at Livia. The sponsor has a driver obligation. Find another car, I said. The memorial is named for Barrett. My father's name is not a tow hook. Livia flinched, but she did not take my side. We have a second inspection tomorrow morning, she said. If it passes, the roadster remains entered for Sunday. With whom driving? She met my eyes. That was the conversation you refused to finish. Chase glanced toward the grid, impatient now that the cameras were no longer flattering him. She told you, we are the registered pair. For the first time, the key felt sharp inside my fist. After my father's crash, Livia had stopped racing because every time she put on a helmet, I found another reason the car, weather or circuit, was not ready. I called it caution. She called it a verdict delivered one condition at a time. I had not known she planned to return beside Chase. She had renewed her competition license in February. I had called it sensible paperwork and changed the subject. She had attended 2 simulator sessions in March. I had inspected the harness dates instead of asking why. Chase had not appeared from nowhere. He had entered through every conversation I converted into a technical objection. That did not excuse Livia. It made the betrayal more complete. She had chosen the one driver who knew exactly what her return would cost me, and I had helped make him the only person willing to discuss it. You were going to tell me when? I asked. You were going to attend when? Mara rose between us. Not in my inspection bay. The steering assembly comes apart now. Driver decisions wait until the car can turn in both directions. She was right, which was inconvenient for everyone. I handed the key to no one. I slipped it into my pocket and rolled my tool chest beneath the right front suspension. Livia watched me unlock the drawers. What are you doing? Finding out who moved the collar. And after that, I looked at the car, then at the woman who had once trusted me enough to sit beside me at 120 miles an hour. After that, I said, you decide whether you wanted a safe driver or a driver who would obey you. The opening cars took the grid without us. Their engines rose together, loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Inside our bay, Livia removed her event radio, placed it on the bench, and reached for a second pair of gloves. Chase stayed at the door. None of us left. Mara sealed the bay while the opening field completed its ceremonial lap. The red tape across our door did not prevent repairs. It prevented Chase, his sponsor engineer, and anyone with a camera from touching the roadster before we documented what had changed. Eli Mercer, the Hart Museum's head fabricator, rolled the alignment table under the suspension. He had worked beside my father and had spent the last 15 years pretending that made him too old to accept instructions from me. You want the good news first? He asked. No, good there isn't any. Livia hid the beginning of a smile by pulling on her gloves. We removed the right wheel and photographed the marks. The new linkage was not cheap or poorly made. Installed at the approved setting, it would have reduced flex and added a margin of safety. Someone had shortened it after the inspection to quicken the steering ratio. Eli measured twice, 3 turns past the road setting. That is Chase's qualifying setup, Livia said. I looked up. You recognize it. He used the same geometry on the Hart 12 last season. A modern closed-wheel car with twice the tire. I know what he used it on. Livia had not approved the final change, but she understood what Chase wanted. Mara checked the chain of work sheet. The document was already in the bay. Nobody produced it like a miracle. Eli's signature covered the original installation. A sponsor technician had completed Thursday's alignment. Chase had taken the car for a private shakedown Friday morning after the inspection paint was applied. Did anyone see him adjust it? Mara asked. No one had. Then we know when the setting changed, not who put a wrench on it. She closed the folder. I will not make the accusation for you. Chase heard enough through the glass to knock once on the sealed door. Mara ignored him. I turned to Livia. You gave him a private test. I gave the registered first driver a private test. In a car you knew I had not approved for him. You had approved the restoration. Then you missed 3 driver meetings and stopped returning the steward's calls. Eli examined a socket, as though its moral character required study. Say the rest, I told her. Livia set down the caliper. You promised my mother you would drive this memorial when we announced it. You promised the apprentices when they finished the body. You promised me after Christmas, again in March, and once more the night registration closed. I said I would try. No, you said you would drive. Then last week you left your helmet on my office table and disappeared into the restoration bay. There are arguments a person wins by correcting one word. This was not one of them. The weekend funded the museum's apprenticeship shop, school visits, and winter wages. I knew that. I had helped build the car that drew the crowds. I had also behaved as if refusing to discuss Sunday would freeze Sunday in place. You could have canceled the Barrett entry, I said, and told 42 employees that your grief remained the only expense. None of us were permitted to calculate. The cruelty in the sentence was mostly its accuracy. Mostly. So you calculated around me. Yes, her voice lowered. I should not have. It was the first apology. It did not come with the key returned or Chase removed. Outside, his portrait filled the event banners. Livia's family had chosen a handsome solution to an ugly problem. Mara gave us until 8 the next morning to present the original geometry, torque record, and 2 clean low-speed tests. If we passed, the car could enter Sunday's non-competitive endurance exhibition. She would decide driver eligibility after reviewing what happened on Friday. Chase stopped her in the corridor. The sponsor contract requires its named driver. The circuit rules require a car that turns, Mara said. You may decide which paper you prefer to lose an argument with. He let her pass, then entered when she removed the seal. My team can finish this in an hour, he said. Your team finished it yesterday, I replied. His gaze went to my pocket. You are holding equipment owned by the Hart Collection. I am holding the key my father carried for 23 years. Sentiment is not title. Livia stepped between us before I could decide whether the line deserved an answer. The car remains in this bay under Mara's order, she said. Eli and Cole lead the repair. Your technician supplies every measurement and tool log from Thursday onward. Chase studied her, and if Cole walks again, the question was meant for both of us. Livia did not soften it. Then I deal with what he leaves. He went to retrieve the records. I returned to the suspension. You did not remove him. The sponsor can withdraw from next year's community program if I exclude its driver without a steward's finding. There it is. What? The reason you plan to explain after the decision. Livia braced both hands on the bench. And you plan to explain your refusal after the event had collapsed. We have become very skilled at objecting to each other's timing. Eli cleared his throat. As the oldest person in the bay, I would like to object to having ears. Neither of us hid the smile. It lasted only a moment, but it belonged to us rather than the crowd outside. We worked through the afternoon. Chase's logs arrived incomplete. The setup sheet listed the approved geometry. Handwritten notes reflected the faster setting. Mara marked the discrepancy and kept investigating. By 6, we had restored the original steering ratio and replaced the stressed lock nut. I performed the first low-speed test in the service lane. Eli rode beside me with a gauge clipped under the dashboard and complained that my braking had aged badly. Your face has aged badly. My face is not subject to inspection. The vibration did not return. For the second test, Livia reached for the passenger helmet. I blocked the door with my arm. Her expression closed. The rules require 2 technicians, I said. I am qualified. You have not driven this car since the rebuild. Neither had you this morning. Eli stepped away from the passenger side. He understood that the next decision had nothing to do with ballast. I wanted to say the linkage had failed. I wanted to say the light was fading. I wanted any sentence that meant no without admitting the source. Livia waited. I moved my arm. She climbed in. We crossed the service lane at 30 miles an hour. Her shoulder remained rigid until the first turn. Then the car held its line, and her hand relaxed against the door. It feels like him, she said. My father had taught both of us in this car. He praised Livia when she was smooth and me when I was precise, which meant each of us spent our 20s trying to steal the other adjective. It feels like the car, I said. That is what he would have said after accepting the compliment. At the far end, I stopped before the return lane. Livia looked at the key in the ignition. "Remove Chase from this car," I said. "I will finish the repair, pass inspection, and drive the first leg Sunday." She did not answer immediately. "I cannot remove him without risking the whole program." "Then risk it." Easy to demand after I carried it while you would not answer. I looked toward the museum roofs beyond the circuit. The workshop lights were coming on one row at a time. "I will be here at 6, I said. "Not because he deserves the car, not because you handed him my place, because Eli and the apprentices should not lose their year to our marriage." Livia's eyes shifted to me. "And us." I turned the key and silenced the engine. "We have not passed inspection." I climbed out before she could mistake that for an answer. At 6 the next morning, the workshop already smelled of coffee and hot metal. Eli had beaten me there by 4 minutes and treated the difference as a moral victory. Livia arrived without an assistant. She carried 3 paper cups, a box of breakfast rolls, and the expression of someone who knew food did not count as an apology. She put the least sweet coffee beside my torque wrench. "Still no sugar," she said. "Still married long enough to know that. The bar is low this morning. Try not to trip over it." Eli opened the breakfast box. "I support conflict that brings pastry." For 2 hours, work gave us a language that did not require forgiveness. Livia read measurements while I set the linkage. She anticipated which spanner I would ask for and sometimes handed me the wrong one when I was being unbearable. The apprentices checked our numbers under Eli's supervision. No one praised us for cooperating. That helped. At 8:15, Mara inspected the repaired assembly. She examined the new witness marks, compared the steering travel left and right, then ordered a rolling load test. The roadster passed. "Car is eligible for the contingency exhibition," she said. "Drivers remain under review." The relief lasted less than a minute. Every phone in the workshop began vibrating at once. Chase had published his onboard footage from Friday. The clip began as I left the grid and ended when I entered the pit lane. He had removed the close view of the steering wheel, correcting late. Over the image, a commentator asked whether grief had made me unsafe in the car built by the man I lost. The caption did not accuse me of anything. It merely arranged the question so millions of strangers could do it for him. An apprentice named Theo lowered his phone. Theo was 19 in his first year and responsible for cataloging every fastener removed from the roadster. "Should I take the Barrett patch off my jacket?" "No," I said. "People are saying you froze. People say carburetors are mysterious. We cannot repair all of them." He nodded, but he looked toward the glass doors where reporters had begun collecting. I could end the question. Mara's preliminary report described the changed setting. Our photographs showed the broken witness paint. The approval chain carried Livia's name. I opened the report on the workshop tablet. Livia saw it. "Publish it. It is not final. The measurements are final. Your approval is on the first page." I know where I signed. I locked the screen. "Mara has not established who changed the setting. You can say the car had a mechanical fault without naming Chase, and let the story become that my wife authorized an unsafe car." Her stare sharpened. "You are doing it again." "Doing what?" "Deciding which truth I can survive. I am not giving him your name to save mine. My name is already there. I put it there." She stepped closer. "Do not turn silence into a gift and make me thank you for it." The workshop had become quiet, not theatrically. People simply stopped pretending they could not hear. Livia took the tablet, unlocked it with the code she had watched me enter for years, and carried it outside. I followed her as far as the doors. Chase was giving an interview beside the inspection lane. His sponsor jacket fit perfectly. Nothing else about the morning did. Livia asked the event media lead for the microphone. Before anyone could construct a polished introduction, she faced the cameras. "Cole Barrett stopped yesterday's run because the steering response changed under load," she said. "A modern linkage had been installed with my approval. Its setting was altered after inspection. The steward is determining by whom. I authorized the test schedule, and I accept responsibility for allowing the car to run before I personally verified the final setting." A reporter asked whether Cole had panicked. He felt a fault before the data team identified it. Stopping was the correct decision. Chase stepped into view. "No one has established a fault during my shakedown." Livia turned toward him. Then give Mara the complete footage. His face changed by very little. I had spent enough years around competitive drivers to notice. The sponsor representative requested an immediate review. By noon, Livia's event authority was suspended pending the outcome. The decision did not remove her from the museum. It removed her power to direct the weekend she had spent a year building. The sponsor named Chase interim event director, because its agreement allowed its senior registered driver to maintain the schedule during a management suspension. Mara objected to him having authority over safety. The sponsor clarified that he controlled operations, not inspection. The distinction comforted no one. Chase's first act was to request the roadster's key. "The car is entered under the Hart collection," he said. "The registered first driver must retain access." Mara looked at me. "I can seal it in race control. That would keep the key neutral. It would also tell the apprentices that I trusted a locked drawer more than the system they worked under." I placed the brass key in Mara's hand. Chase held out his. Mara did not give it to him. "You receive it only during an authorized test window. It returns to me afterward." "Acceptable," he said. The key still moved from my reach toward his authority. The result felt the same. Livia stood outside the circle, stripped of the title that had let her hand it over the first time. I expected satisfaction. What I felt was the clean, unpleasant recognition that my attempt to protect her had helped put Chase in charge. Inside the workshop, Theo was removing sponsor decals from a tool cabinet because the suspension notice required branding to be covered in work areas. He pulled too hard and tore one in half. "Slowly," I told him. "Heat the adhesive first. Does the apprenticeship still exist next month?" I could not promise him it did. Livia answered from behind me. "Your contract runs through winter regardless of the weekend result. And after winter, that depends on what we do next." Theo looked between us. Together, neither of us answered. He returned to the decal with admirable interest. Livia and I walked to the empty grandstand. Without a crowd, the circuit looked smaller and more honest. She sat 3 seats away from me. "You were right to release the report," I said. "You were right to stop the car." We had reduced marriage to an exchange of technical findings. "Why did you register me as reserve?" I asked. "Because I kept hoping you would come, while planning to drive with him. Because I stopped believing hope was a schedule." I pressed my palms together. "There were days I put on the helmet. I know. I found it moved around the workshop like a guilty pet. Despite myself, I laughed once." Livia's mouth softened, then tightened again. "You could have told me you were afraid. You could have told me you wanted to race again." I did. The answer was immediate. I remembered every conversation she meant. Her asking about test days, her renewing her license, her standing too long beside the driver roster. I had answered with tire temperatures, insurance limits, and weather forecasts. Facts arranged as locked doors. Below us, Chase entered the inspection lane with Mara. She opened race control, removed the brass key, and logged the time before placing it in his hand. He looked up toward the grandstand. "He wants us divided," I said. We did not need his help. Livia rose. "Where are you going?" "To watch the test I no longer have authority to stop." I followed her down. This time, when Chase climbed into my father's car, the key had reached him through every silence Livia, and I had defended as protection. Mara limited Chase's test to 5 laps and set a ceiling well below the advertised record. The roadster carried fresh witness paint on every steering adjustment and 2 extra sensors beneath the bonnet. Eli monitored oil pressure. I watched the front tires. Livia stood at the pit wall without a radio because Chase had removed her from the communications channel. On the first lap he behaved. On the second, his time dropped by 4 seconds. "He is braking later," Eli said. Still inside the limit. Mara did not sound pleased about it. Chase crossed for lap 3 and did not lift where the test plan required. The engine note sharpened along the back straight. Livia reached for a radio that was no longer clipped to her jacket. "He is chasing the sponsor time. He cannot reach it under the steward's ceiling," I said. "He thinks the display will keep the faster number." The public timing board was not supposed to record an official result. It did not need to. Cameras were recording everything. By lap 4, Oil temperature had climbed past the mark Eli, and I said, the original engine could endure heat, but not with modern tires holding it under cornering load for that long. Myra raised the return board. Chase passed it. She switched to the black flag. He stayed out. The roadster entered the final bend too fast. Its rear moved half a step, then settled. The crowd cheered because danger looks like skill from far enough away. Livia leaned over the wall and gave the flat-handed signal we used during private tests. Back off. Return now. Chase accelerated. Something cold moved through me. Not fear of the car. Recognition of a person who had decided every warning was part of the audience. I took the large red stop board from Mara's stand and walked to the edge of the pit lane. Cole, Mara warned. He is looking here. The roadster came off the last corner. Chase's helmet turned. He saw me holding the board where my father used to stand. I did not wave, I held it still. For 2 seconds I thought he would pass again. Then the oil pressure light flickered on the pit display. The engine note broke. Chase lifted and turned in. The car rolled to us with a metallic ticking beneath the bonnet. I reached the door before he had released the harness. Kill it. Pressure recovered. Kill it. Mara repeated the order. He shut down. Livia opened the bonnet. A union on the auxiliary oil line had loosened as the engine mounts heated. Oil mist marked the lower panel, not enough to empty the system, enough to warn us before real damage. Chase climbed out. That line was Cole's work. Yes, I said, and the temperature limit was mine too. Mara removed his driver credential from the temporary event sleeve. You ignored 2 return signals and a black flag. The first board was not visible in the sun. The black flag was visible to a child in the north stand. The pressure fault occurred after the instruction, which is why instructions are followed before a fault proves them correct. Mara wrote the suspension herself. You do not drive again until the Sunday hearing. The crowd did not know what had happened yet. Chase did. He looked at Livia as if she had allowed the punishment. You told me the program needed the time, he said. I told you it needed a completed weekend. Same result. No, that is the difference. You keep driving past. He walked away before the cameras reached the bay. We pushed the roadster inside. The oil union could be replaced. The bearings needed inspection. Sunday's exhibition was now uncertain, and so was the engine my father had assembled with his own hands. I stared at the dark mist beneath the bonnet. Livia stood beside me. You knew how to make him stop. He knew my father used that board. So did you. That was the first opening she gave me, and I nearly closed it. Instead, I asked Eli to lead the pressure test and followed Livia into the small paddock office. The room held a folding table, 2 chairs, and framed photographs from old races. My father appeared in 4 of them. In every picture, he was moving. The last thing I said to him was that he cared more about that car than coming home, I told her. Livia did not interrupt. He was driving the Heart 12 that day, not the Roadster. I had seen brake temperatures climbing during practice. He said the readings were within range. I told him he heard only the numbers that let him race. I had told this part before. The official part came next. A cracked cooling duct, fading brakes, an impact at the outside wall. What I had never said was smaller. He called me from the grid. I rejected the call. Livia's face changed. I wanted him to sit with what I said, I continued. He died 11 minutes later. Every time you asked me to drive, all I heard was that phone vibrating on my bench. She sat across from me. Cole. I know answering would not have repaired the duct. Knowing is not the same as believing. No. For once, neither of us tried to improve the sentence. Livia folded her hands. I stopped racing because you asked for 1 season. Then you needed another. After that, you never asked. You inspected every opportunity until it failed. I thought I was keeping you alive. You were keeping yourself from receiving another call. It was not gentle, it was true. Why Chase? I asked. Because he would drive. Because the sponsor trusts his name. because I was angry enough to choose the person you would hate most. There it was, the part no contract had forced. Are you still in love with him? No, her answer held no delay. I was willing to use him. That is not better. We returned to the workshop separately. At the door, Chase waited with a thin folder under his arm. He had lost the test, but not his confidence. You should read what happens after a failed Memorial weekend, he told Livia. She did not take the folder. I know what I signed. Does Cole? I looked at her. Livia's silence answered first. Chase placed the folder on the tool bench. The sponsor agreement was not new evidence. It was the same deal that had paid for the weekend, the one Livia had approved months earlier. A performance option allowed the sponsor to assume management of the Heritage driving program if the Barrett exhibition failed and public safety problems damaged the event. It did not own the museum or my father's car. It would give Chase operational control over which cars ran, which mechanics remained on the program, and whose version of the memorial survived. You knew, I said. Livia looked at the pressure gauges, then at me. I believed we would finish. With him driving. With someone driving. Chase tapped the folder. Sunday can still solve this. Restore my credential, complete the target run, and the option expires. You are suspended, Mara said from the doorway. She had arrived before he exercised authority he did not have. And this circuit will not trade a black flag for a funding clause. Chase left the folder where it was. The brass key lay sealed in a clear evidence pouch on Mara's belt. The roadster sat behind us with its bonnet open, and its engine wounded by a driver Livia had chosen because he would not stop. For the first time all weekend, I did not want the key back. I wanted the truth Livia had kept, while asking me to trust her with the car. The engine bearings were clean. That was the last easy result we received. The loosened oil union had reduced pressure without starving the crankshaft. Eli replaced the fitting, pressure-tested the line, and made Theo repeat the test until he could explain why each number mattered. By Saturday evening, the roadster could run. The people around it were less certain. Livia and I met in the paddock office after the workshop closed. She had brought the sponsor agreement. I had brought the helmet I kept moving from shelf to shelf. I should have shown you the control option before I signed, she said. I should have withdrawn properly when I knew I would not drive. You left me believing you might change your mind. I wanted to be the man who would. I needed the man who would answer. Neither confession canceled the other. Livia removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table, not as a performance and not as a threat. I am going to the hotel tonight. If we stay in the same room, we will make one frightened decision and call it repair. I looked at the ring. Are you leaving me? I am refusing to settle us before the hearing. She waited until I nodded, then put the ring back on. The gesture hurt more than taking it off would have. It meant the marriage remained real enough to require time. At 9, Chase found me alone beside the roadster. He wore no sponsor jacket now. Without the logos, he looked less powerful and more familiar. The man who had known Livia before grief rearranged both of us. You fixed the line, he said. Eli fixed the line. I checked his work. Always careful with credit. You should try it. He leaned against the empty tool bench. Livia will lose the program tomorrow. The sponsor will install me, reduce the restoration staff, and turn this place into 3 polished cars and a merchandise wall. You make the future sound unpleasant for someone trying to own it. I am telling you what the board will approve once the money stops. There is no board hearing tonight. No, just a husband deciding whether his wife carries the fault she signed for. His offer was simple. At the Sunday steward hearing, I would state that Livia had approved the modification without technical advice, and that Chase had driven within the limits he received. In exchange, he would use sponsor discretion to keep the Barrett car at the museum and retain the current apprentices through winter. He wanted one unrestricted filmed run after Mara restored his credential. You ignored a black flag, I said. For 1 lap. That is the traditional unit. He pushed away from the bench. Think about the people whose wages are attached to your principles. I have. That is why you are not driving. Then they lose. Come to the hearing and say the offer where Mara can hear it. Chase smiled. You need a witness because Livia will not believe you. I need you to choose whether you believe your own argument. He agreed. The hearing began Sunday at 7 in race control. Mara identified everyone before any decision could be made. Herself as chief steward, Chase as the suspended driver and interim operations director, Livia as the suspended event director, me as restorer and reserve driver, and Elise Warren as the sponsor's compliance officer. Elise had not appeared earlier because she had no authority over the car until the formal review. Her role was to decide whether Chase's conduct complied with the sponsor agreement. Mara pointed to the red light on the wall recorder. This is an official safety proceeding. Everything after this statement is recorded and available to all parties. Does anyone object? No one did. She asked Chase why he had requested a private meeting before the hearing. He looked at me. He could have denied it. Instead, he tried to make the bargain respectable. I proposed a practical route to preserve the program, he said. Mr. Barrett confirms Mrs. Hart authorized the unsafe setup without my knowledge. I complete a demonstration at the required time. In return, the sponsor protects the car and existing apprentices. Elise stopped writing. You offered employment protection in exchange for testimony and an unrestricted run. I offered to use discretion in a crisis. You do not possess that discretion, she said. Chase's eyes moved to Livia. She knows the alternative. This was the moment I could have made him the entire problem. I could have described Livia as deceived, myself as injured, and our marriage as collateral damage caused by an ambitious ex. That version would have been popular. It would also have been false. I faced Mara. Livia approved an unverified change and hid the sponsor option from me. I restored the car, promised to drive, and withdrew without giving her time to replace the entry honestly. When the fault appeared, I withheld the preliminary report because I wanted to choose which consequences she faced. Those decisions created the opening Chase used. Livia stared at me. Then she turned toward the recorder. I selected Chase because he met the sponsor requirement and because I knew it would punish Cole for withdrawing, she said. I treated the museum's need as authority over his car and his grief. I also planned to drive without telling my husband because I was tired of asking his fear for permission. The room remained quiet while Mara wrote. There was no gasp, no instant reward for honesty. Elise suspended Chase from all sponsor representation pending a full conduct review. His ignored black flag, incomplete footage, and recorded bargain violated rules that had existed before the weekend. She could not cancel the management option herself. That required the sponsor committee on Monday. Mara ruled Livia ineligible to direct Sunday's event. She also ruled me ineligible for a competitive timed run because I had not completed the required practice. Then the exhibition is over, Chase said. The competitive version is, Mara replied. She opened the original event plan to a page marked months earlier. The contingency was not new. When we first registered the 70-year-old roadster, Mara had required a non-competitive paired demonstration in case whether mechanical limits or driver eligibility prevented the target run. 2 approved reserve drivers, she said. Half distance each, mandatory handoff, fixed speed ceiling, no official time. The purpose is to demonstrate safe operation, not satisfy a sponsor target. Livia looked at her. My license remains current, but my event authority is suspended. Authority and eligibility are different. I decide eligibility. You decide whether you can follow my limit. Mara looked at me next. And you decide whether taking the wheel was courage or another way to keep it from her. The brass key rested in its evidence pouch on the table. Chase rose. A parade lap will not stop the option. Perhaps not, Livia said, But your time was never worth the car. It was the first time she rejected his solution without asking what it cost. Mara gave us until noon inspection. The exhibition would begin at 2 if the roadster passed, and if both drivers signed the same safety limit in her presence. Outside race control, Livia stopped beside me. "You did not save me in there," she said. "I am trying to stop doing favors no one requested. It is irritatingly late. I have been told my timing needs work." Her eyes warmed, but she did not reach for me. "If we drive," she said, "we drive separately. We do not call one clean lap forgiveness." Agreed. We returned to the workshop with 5 hours, 1 car, and no guarantee that honesty would preserve anything except the right to know what we had actually lost. The final pressure test exposed one cracked washer beneath the auxiliary line. Theo found it. He held the copper ring on his palm as if it were a medal. Eli inspected it and said, "Congratulations. You have prevented 3 old men from arguing with a leak." "There are only 2 old men here," I said. I included the car. By 11:30, the roadster passed Mara's inspection. She verified the steering marks, oil pressure, brake temperature, and the mechanical stop that limited throttle travel for the exhibition. Chase would have called the stop an insult. My father would have called it a tool. At noon, Livia and I signed the same speed ceiling in front of Mara. No private amendment. No second set of instructions. Mara handed me the key and kept a duplicate seal on the throttle stop. The crowd had expected a record attempt. Instead, Mara explained over the circuit speakers that the Barrett Roadster would complete a paired safety demonstration. She did not offer our marriage as entertainment. She stated the inspection result, driver limit and mandatory handoff. Some spectators left the rail, most stayed. I climbed into the driver's seat for the first half. Livia waited at the handoff point wearing a white helmet with one narrow black stripe. Chase had once told her the design looked unfinished. She kept it for that reason. The brass key turned beneath my fingers. On the first lap, I heard every noise twice, once as the car made it, once as memory tried to explain it. The steering remained exact. Oil pressure held. At the corner where my father crashed in the Heart 12, the roadster's shadow crossed the outside wall. My hands tightened. I did not see the accident. I saw a road, a limit, and the return board waiting ahead. I stayed under the ceiling. The crowd cheered anyway. After 3 laps, I entered the handoff lane. Livia stood behind the marked line. Mara watched from the wall. The rules required the engine off and the key transferred by hand. I stopped, released the harness, and climbed out. For one brief second, the old instinct returned. I could tell Livia the engine felt warm. I could ask for one more inspection. I could make fear sound like expertise and nobody would accuse me of lying. Instead, I held out the key. "Pressure is stable," I said. "Right front is 2 degrees warmer. It's settled by the second lap." Livia did not take it immediately. "Do you want me to drive?" The question was quiet. The microphones did not catch it. "Yes." She closed her fingers around the red leather fob. "Within Mara's limit," I added. "You remain very romantic." I rebuilt the carburetors. That is not an answer. It is the best one available in a pit lane. She climbed in. Livia's first launch was smoother than mine. I disliked that for almost 4 seconds, then remembered I had missed disliking it. She completed the opening lap below the ceiling. On the second, the public timing display showed she could reach Chase's target if she accelerated down the back straight. The number sat there like an invitation written by someone who had never paid for the consequence. Livia lifted early. The time stayed ordinary. The engine stayed healthy. On her final lap, the apprentices stood along the wall in their work jackets. Theo raised the cracked washer between 2 fingers. Livia pointed at him as she passed the lane, acknowledging the smallest part that had mattered. She returned the car to the handoff box and switched it off. The roadster had completed the distance. No record, no failure. No one carried it home in pieces. Mara signed the exhibition complete. Chase watched from outside the credentialed area. Elise stood beside him with two sponsor security officers, not to create a public arrest, but to ensure he surrendered event access after his suspension. He handed over his radio and badge. When he looked toward Livia, she did not go to him. She came to the car. "The pressure," I asked. "Stable, your second gear gate still catches. It has character. It has a worn bushing." My father would have enjoyed her more. The Monday sponsor committee did not reward us for being dramatic. It reviewed the recorded hearing, Mara's safety findings, the completed contingency, and the public program results. Chase's ignored flags and bargaining attempt ended his role with the Heritage program. His contract as a professional driver remained his problem with the sponsor, not ours. The committee declined to activate management control. The event had fulfilled the approved safety contingency. Attendance remained sufficient to fund the community contribution, and the museum had disclosed its failures before the sponsor discovered them elsewhere. The sponsorship continued for 1 year under conditions. Livia could no longer exercise unilateral authority over event entries or technical changes. A safety committee including Mara, Eli, and an outside engineer would approve future programs. The museum published the real incident report, including Livia's signature and my broken driving commitments. I accepted the outside engineer's authority over any car I restored for public use. My surname no longer counted as an inspection. The 42 workshop jobs remained. The apprenticeships remained. The Barrett Roadster stayed with the Hart Collection under its existing joint preservation agreement, which neither Chase nor the sponsor had ever owned. Practical consequences arrived with less music than the race. Livia moved into the Circuit Hotel for 6 weeks. I stayed in the apartment above my restoration shop. We met with a counselor on Tuesdays, separately at first, then together. The first useful argument was about the word safe. I used it to mean nothing bad could happen. Livia used it to mean she retained the right to choose which risks belonged to her. Neither definition had left much room for the other person. We did not solve my father's death. I answered his old voicemail for the first time by listening to the end. He had complained about the coffee, asked me to bring a smaller wrench, and said he would call after the run. There was no final lesson hidden inside it. Livia sold none of her responsibility to Chase. She admitted choosing him partly to hurt me. I admitted that my long silence had punished her while allowing me to appear injured by every decision made in it. At the end of 6 weeks, she came to the workshop without luggage. "I'm not moving back today," she said. I cleaned the apartment. That sounds suspiciously like pressure. It was becoming a biological concern. She looked around the clean bench. "I want dinner. That is less efficient than reconciliation." Good. We began with dinner. 3 months later, Mara approved the Roadster for a private test on the Old North Road. No crowd waited. No sponsor board displayed a time. The winter trees were bare, and the passenger seat was colder than I remembered. Livia stood beside the driver's door in a rust-red leather jacket. I carried the brass key. She held out her hand, then stopped. "I am asking," she said, "do you want me to drive?" I placed the key in her palm. "Yes." I walked around the bonnet and took the passenger seat. Livia settled behind the scarred walnut wheel. Before inserting the key, she looked at me once more. I fastened my belt, within the limit. Still romantic. Still here. That answer she accepted. She turned the brass key. My father's car started between us, and this time neither of us mistook holding the wheel for owning the road.